Hello, Dave here. Welcome to Learn JavaScript with me. This is Chapter 11, Ajax, Exercise 1. So this is our intro to Ajax. And we're working from the book. The book is Modern JavaScript Development Design. It was written by Larry Ullman. More information is available at larryoman.com. And also, more information is available at davecoast.com. There's a post out here, and I just have it as a sticky right now to the top. And it has this js.davecoast.com, and that is all of the exercises available, so you can bring them up and run it through and Firebug in your own browser session. And I have a link to larryoman.com. No relationship with them, except I'm using the book to learn JavaScript. And here is a link to all of my code so far. So all of these exercises, the code will just download as a quick little zip and continue reading here. Here's the Learn JavaScript with Me playlist. So here's that learning JavaScript link, same link there. But anyway, here's all the exercises. I'm just working through it here for the sake of example on my local host. So our Ajax example today for Ajax 1 here is basically I hit this button and this text shows up, and that text came from a text file out on my server, and it's basically off of my document root. And we'll see all the files involved in a moment. Basically, in this video, we're going to do 5 things. We're going to demonstrate how to create an Ajax object, browser independent. We're going to demonstrate how to set up the Ajax request, how to execute the Ajax request, how to monitor the request status, and finally how to utilize the Ajax response text. So let's start out by taking a look at the code. This is the main JavaScript file, and you'll notice that it is more comments than code, so it is really not that complex. Here's another JavaScript file. I call it Chapter 11, Create Ajax Object, and this is just reused all over the place. So put this out as a separate function call, and you'll notice that it basically just has a named function in here, and it, based on the browser, it sets up the Ajax request object. And we have our HTML. So a lot of fluffy stuff up here, but down here is where the useful bits and pieces are, and basically just the button that we're going to listen to for a click, and just the div location where we're going to place the HTML that we get back from the text file. And finally, we have an actual text file. Here's the text file. Notice that my path, right, is showing it in relationship to the document root, which is this MJS part of it, htdocs MJS. And then I go into this Ajax directory, and you'll notice that my HTML is at the document root, and my JS file is in the JS subdirectory. So I just put my Ajax related files. This one happens to be text. All the other ones for this chapter are PHP files. And we just have a bunch of text out here. You see with the H1 style color blue. So I ought to be able to change this to red, save it, come back here, and if I click the button, it should change this to red. But most of the time, or some of the time, I don't want to say most of the time, but sometimes you have to make sure you clear your cache first. So I'm going to clear the cache anyway before I hit the button. because sometimes you need, sometimes you don't. Don't want you to think, oh, I did something wrong. So let me go ahead and clear recent history, and I just have the cache button on. I'll clear that. And if I hit this button, you see that it changed that to red. So very, very simplistic. Let's go ahead and take a look at the actual JavaScript code quickly, or not quickly. Let's take a quick look at it, and we'll see where the key pieces are, and then we'll go actually walk through the code through Firebug. So everything is within this window.onload function, right? You see that that's an anonymous function because it doesn't have a name. And we come down here to the first executable statement, and we create a variable called Ajax work. And I just call that, that's my Ajax object that I'm going to use. And notice that I set that equal to a function value. Well, that's this function up here. And instead of copying this code in or retyping the code, just created it as a function. So this is creating its own variable here. Remember, this is locally scoped. So it creates a variable called Ajax work, sets it to null. So it just created the variable. Then if this method is available to the window, then go ahead and create Ajax work as a new XML HTTP request object. So that's the actual Ajax object, and sometimes referred to as XHR. And otherwise, if it's an older IE, you have to set it up as an active object, so it's a new active object with this items here. If you create the object this way or create the object this way, either way, the object operates the same way from this point on. It's just how you create it. So we return that object back to our program, and now we can actually utilize it. So we created Ajax object. We go ahead and use the onReadyStateChange method listener and execute a anonymous function if the state of the Ajax object changes. So if anything happens in Ajax land, it's going to go through this code. It'll check and see if it has a status of state of 4, which means it's done. Then if it is done, let's go ahead and see what the status is. If it's a good status, anything between 203 and 299, including 304, which is basically didn't have to do anything, I already have that information cached. Then we go ahead and insert into Ajax element ID, right? Go back to the HTML here, and we see that we have Ajax element ID. That's where it's going to actually put this text in this paragraph tag. So and using the inner HTML method. But here's the important piece. It is the response text property of the Ajax object that contains that value, again, only if it is done and if it is successful. If it's not successful, we go ahead and plop in an error message. And at the very, and that's it for listening for the Ajax object on ready state change. Then we also do a click event listener and do another anonymous function. And here we actually do these two statements, this ajax work.open, which is the setup, and this ajax work.send, which is the actual execute. The open has 3 parameters. One is the method that we're going to use, and generally get or post. This, we're using a get, and that determines how data is sent, even though we're not sending any data. for this first example. Then here is the actual URL. And again, that's this our URL pointing up here to this text file, right? Ajax directory, and that name, intro1. Well, there's that Ajax directory, and there's our intro1. And come on back here. And finally, true. True is asynchronous. If it's false, it does it in a synchronous fashion where it waits for it. So we're doing an asynchronous request. So once we set up the Ajax request, now we can actually execute it by issuing the send. And we have no here, which means we're not passing it any data in that argument. And that's Ajax. So notice in here that we are doing, here's the create Ajax object. Here is monitoring when it changes. Here is, so created, oh, here's the setup. Then we actually execute. Here's the actual execution of the Ajax object. Here's how we monitor it. I'm just trying to go back to the order from the beginning and then actually utilize the data right here. So that's our 5 pieces in our introduction. Let's go ahead and walk through this in debug just to see how it actually works. There's our code. Let's go ahead and come back here. Right? I can click this all day long and nothing will change because the text is already there. I could refresh it and click and get the data back out there. Again, just a simple button. So let's go ahead and debug the code to see how it works. I'm just going to go back to Chapter 11 exercises and bring it up again fresh. Go ahead and turn on debugger. Let's reload to see all the sources. Don't worry about that. That's related to the goofy Google stuff I have in there. I come up here to the file. It defaults to the HTML. I'm going to go ahead and select my JavaScript file. This is the one we just talked about moments ago. I'm going to set a breakpoint, the window.onload first executable statement, the onReady state change first executable statement, and the button click first executable statement. And let's go ahead. We'll refresh the page. It stops at the very first line of code. And again, this is what we just walked through, but let's see how it actually works in real life. I'm calling my external file, and we should go there up here next. As I step, I click step, and notice that now I'm in this file. And just for the fun of it here, right, we can see that here is those 2 files. And those are the ones we are seeing here. So this is that create. This is how we create the Ajax object. So we create a variable, set it to null. Then if we have the XML HTTP request available to us, anything but older versions of IE, we go ahead and create a new request object. And now once I click it, it actually created it. And you see that that is an object. Notice the green, ready state is equal to 0, and all those kind of things. And we see over here our Ajax work with the details. I step again, and we return. And now step again up here. We can see that Ajax work was returned. Those names do not have anything to do with each other. They are local variables. So just the fact that I called them both Ajax work doesn't matter. So the next statement here is that event listener, and then we turn on this event listener, and now we finish, and we're sitting there waiting for something to happen on the page. And I'll just bring that up a little bit here. And now once I click the button, ooh, notice that we went to the button click event listener, and we're at the first executable statement there. Here's where we actually do the setup of the call. So that's the open. We're kind of like turning it on. So now we're ready to do the call. Notice that Ajax work ready state, it's equal to 1. Well, we did do something with the Ajax object, but we haven't completed it's not equal to 4. So as I step through there, it doesn't do anything else. And it comes back down. It completes the setup. So it did that link. And now I actually send the Ajax request. And now look at that. The ready state is equal to 4. That means it is done. Notice that I have down here, here's the actual Ajax request. Notice that it's a status 304, not modified, right? That's because it's the same as it was moments ago, and that's still okay. It's a 304. And if I open that up a little bit, let's just take a look at this. You'll see that the response text, here is the data that is in our file. So let me scrunch that back down. So if it's equal to 4 and status is one of these values, well, look at this. The status is 200. And so it's going to go ahead and use this inner HTML and put this response text. And there's the text onto the page. So let's go ahead and execute that. Now the text is out there. And go ahead and finish that up. And we see the text is displayed. And that is how it works. So let me just reiterate 3 things. Let me bring up the code here for a second, just to reinforce these pieces of the puzzle. We really did 5 important takeaways here. One is creating the Ajax object. And we do that in a function over here just to create an object. For everything but old IE, it creates an XML HTTP request, a new one of those objects. Otherwise, it creates an ActiveX object, and you need to pass it these values in here. But once that is done, the object itself behaves the same. So step 1 takeaway is creating a new Ajax object. And that's right here, or this line, this whole line, right? I guess it's going into a variable, Ajax work. So this is creating the Ajax object. Then we need to set up the Ajax request, and that's down here, right? We only do that when the button is clicked, and we do that with the ajaxOpen method. There's 3 arguments. The first one is the method that we're going to use, and that's get. And what get does is if there is any data to pass, it's passed as part of the URL, as opposed to post, which passes it in this argument here. But either way, there's no data to pass, so get or post really probably doesn't matter here, and we're using the get. Then we have the URL. And finally, we have whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, and when true, it's asynchronous. So there's number 2, the setup. Then we do the actual execute of the Ajax request, which is the send method. And if there's data to pass, we pass it here for the post. Otherwise, we pass null. So that's number 3, execute the Ajax request. Number 4 is monitor, and that's up here based on the onReady state change. And There are other ready state values out there. We saw 1 and 4 so far today, but basically what we need to get started, you can read up more on that, but we need a ready state equal to 4, which means that the request has completed, and then there's a status property that shows whether it's good or bad or in between. And varying degrees, there's different values up there. So that's number 4, is monitoring our request. And then we actually need to utilize the response text, and that we do that here. We're just using inner HTML and sending this response text to the page just to see it. So this is our intro to Ajax, Chapter 11. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we both know a little bit more about JavaScript. Thank you.